Hello and welcome back to Teach Us to Pray. This season we are going age by age through our church, just the different demographics of our church. And so we are taking some time to sit down with the ministry leaders and leaders of our church that oversee that. And so I'm here with Pastor Parker O'Shea. I'm here with Trace Keller. I'm here with Danny O'Brien. And these guys oversee and help care for the middle school and high school of our church. So we're going to be diving into that age group today. So as we sit down and we talk and we think, okay, Lord, how are you teaching the youth to pray? How are we looking at those two age groups differently in a way, because they are different age groups? Like, how are we helping to educate them in prayer? How are we pointing them to prayer? How should they be praying? Those are the questions we want to put on the table. Those are the things we want to discuss. But thank you guys, first and foremost, for being here and sitting in on this. I think you guys are the experts in the room and want to hear your heart and your thoughts towards the youth of our church. So that's the purpose of this, and that's why we're here. So let's crack it open. What are the middle school and high schoolers of this culture that we live in right now dealing with, and how should we be praying for them?
I mean, they're living in the same culture, the same world that all of us are. And so, I mean, if we did want to put a timestamp on when we're having this conversation, students just got back to school.
Yeah.
So whether they're at a public school, private school, homeschool, no school, whatever they're doing these days, they're in and around people. Yeah. And something that I think is in their world that maybe is a little bit more distant to us is just actually interacting with other human beings in person sometimes, you know. It's but overall, they live in the same world we are. They may be a little bit more connected to culture in some ways, and in other ways distant. So I think the presidential election will affect their life in theory a little bit less than it would, you know, an adult's thought process. But they care intimately about their lives, about what's going on in the world around them. They care about people being treated with honor, and they live in the same world as us. And so in the way that we're thinking about praying for one another, I think that's how we pray for middle school, high school students in a lot of the same ways.
That's good. Trace, Daniel, agree, disagree?
Yeah, disagree.
No. Yeah, please.
I would just kind of add off that, like, our generation right now, specifically mine, because I'm in this generation, is like there's so much passion, there's so much zeal. Yeah. It's like, okay, how do we direct this to Jesus? Mm-hmm. Also, like, we're thinking like technology, and it's okay, get your phone, just get it away. Yeah. Like, let's pray for that kids would start seeing, like, okay, this actually is kind of like just a drug. Yeah. You just kind of go for it and say what it is. And just, like, that's what we need prayer for, is, like, there's the zeal and the passion of these kids that's just getting put towards their phones. Yeah. And for things that don't really matter, that aren't eternal. Yeah. And so that's honestly just a big prayer point of mine. Is like, okay, how do we take these kids' zeal and passion and put it towards Jesus, put it towards missions, put it towards things that actually matter.
And I know that's a big topic, the digital world, and we've talked about that before in the Digital Detox podcast we did about just the youth and how it's being raised on technology. And I think that is a difference, I guess, compared to like my generation, where that was just getting introduced. And so there is a difference there. And so, like, how do we point them towards other things? I think that's a great point.
Yeah. So. I mean, I think even off of that is, like, how do we point is, most kids would say, oh yeah, I'm addicted to my phone, and it affects the way that I view things. Right.
So that's a big prayer request then, praying for them.
Yeah, it's like action. It's like conviction, acting on it. Yeah. That's a problem in the church, the problem with the world is conviction and actually acting on it.
In the middle school world, Daniel, is that same? Like, are you noticing the same?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, at that age, like, some of them have phones, some of them don't. So it's more of like a battleground of, like, trying to encourage them to take charge of their life and realize that they're old enough to do that, because they're just coming out of children's ministry and, on their way to high school. And so it's kind of this transformative period for them where they're trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to figure out what they want to be. Yeah. And so, like, if you're able to be there as a middle school leader, like, you're the one who's showing them like, this is what it's like to be an adult, and an adult Jesus follower.
They're looking at you're a model to them. I mean, as a leader and just someone older,
and a male model.
Yeah, and they probably think you're cool. Because middle school kids still think some older people are cool, right? So
exactly.
Like, oh, this guy's cool. I like hanging out with him. And so you modeling your life is probably on display in more than ways that you want it to be, probably. But but they're looking at you, and so like, how does Daniel deal with phones? How does Daniel deal with these subjects and stuff? So that's actually a really cool prayer point to think. Okay, that's how we could be praying for these middle school kids. Is that one, that they'd have good models, like good people in front of them, their family or the youth leaders or whatever in their life, that they would have good models because they're looking to them. In probably more ways than the high schoolers maybe, because they start to like whatever, but they're still there. I mean, the models, I still think back to my high school days. I'm like, man, I was looking up to the couple dudes in my life that I was like, oh, those guys are cool. I want to be like them or whatever. So that's still there, I think, in high school too. Maybe they just don't show it as much because they're feeling cooler. But
yeah, I think it's in every single one of us. We're always looking toward other people and people that we respect, people that we admire, people that we think are respectable, or people that we think we want to be like. We're imitating so often what we see in other people. And so in middle school, what's interesting is middle school students are very open and impressionable, and they're open with being open about that.
That's cool.
They're like, you're cool. Like they will follow you. They want to hang out. Yeah. In high school, it still happens, but I think it's a little bit more like, I'll watch you from afar, because by the time you're in high school, I think sometimes you've had your trust violated, and you've been discouraged by people. True. And so there's a little bit more skepticism, and there's a little bit more like, I'll wait and see until I find that you're a reliable or trustworthy person.
To earn that trust as a leader a little more.
Yeah. Well, I think beyond just being leaders, I think just being a human in their life, where are they going to listen to you or not? Because by the time you're in high school, they're identifying whether you're a hypocrite in the things that you say and what you follow up on or not. And so I think with high school students, there's got to be a strong example in the sense of like, don't just do what I say, but do what I do also. And we have to be people who are just aware of that. And so I love the youth because they're just real, and they're willing to. You see the best and the worst sometimes, and in humanity, because you see the most hopeful people in the world. Oftentimes in middle school, they just trust and love everybody and just want to have fun. And then, I mean, it happens in middle school too, but more often in high school, you see people who are hurt and have become jaded with life and other people, to where they're not going to trust anybody unless you show in their life a very real investment in the care.
So where's the prayer request in that? Because I'm hearing a couple different things, I guess, in my mind. But like, is it that we'd have legit leaders that like are faithful, or is it that these kids would let their guard down and let people in, or like where's the prayer request there? Like I
to
think
me,
about that.
The thing is just awareness and understanding of the hearts of what I see, at least, and maybe I'm completely off, but that's what I've seen consistently throughout the years. Is that we need to meet students where they are, and not, I don't know, not ask them to be somebody they're not. So whether they're in church or they're not in church, whether you're like a quote unquote youth leader or somebody in their life in some capacity, like be real, be honest. Don't ask somebody to do something that you're not willing to do yourself, and pray for them to have courage to. When they do fail, when they do fall short, when they have been given examples that aren't perfect, like every single one of us, that there's forgiveness, there's understanding of their own weakness. And
no, that's good. Okay. So those are some things we should be praying for our youth, and how we want to disciple and raise them up and care for them. What about, how should they be praying in this culture that they're in? And I'm looking at three different people groups. There's the ones that don't know Jesus at all, and we should probably be praying for them to come to know Christ. So add that to pray for this. But that's a demographic of youth, and there's a youth demographic that are probably just culturally coming to church because their parents are bringing them. And then there's probably people that are on fire and like love Jesus, and some of these mission trips you guys are sharing, like these kids are out there doing it, and it's like that's amazing. How should these two groups be praying and growing in prayer, and how can we bolster their prayer life or point them to that as models? We're all recognizing we have to be that model and that consistency and that faithful person in their life. But it's a big question, I guess. But how how should they be praying? And maybe we're talking to the third group in that regard because they're the ones that are following Jesus. But how should they be praying moving forward in their own life, but also for their own age group, I guess? Does that make sense?
The first thing in my mind is, I guess, to add one more prayer request back to the how should we be praying for middle school and high school students. I think my biggest thing is, if you don't know a middle school or high school student, then get to know one.
Start there.
And ask them how you can be praying for them, and interact with them, be in their life, and just love them. Yeah. And you'll find really quickly how you can be praying for them.
Be present with them.
Now, if they are a middle school or high school student, and how should they be praying? I think that they should just be praying. Figure out how to work through, like, just do it, like, put it to practice. Experiment. Yeah. I don't know, different posture, different, take passages in the Bible and pray those over their lives.
That's good though. What are some ways we can encourage them to try, or like what, cause I remember at my age, I was influential. And so I was influenced by a lot of different things is what I mean by that. Like, so when people gave me ideas, I was like, oh, cool, I'll try that. And so what are some ways we can encourage them to be praying or building that prayer life, because some of them have probably just started thinking about it. And so, it's like, hey, you got to do it in the morning, got to do it in the afternoon, do it in the evening. Like what are those things you've found that have been helpful as we point the youth to prayer? Does that make sense?
I've got a couple ideas, but
fire.
Okay. Yeah. There are passages in the Bible of other people's prayer life, so the model prayer that Jesus laid out. Yeah. Nehemiah has a beautiful prayer in the book of Nehemiah. I would say take those passages and pray through them and apply them into their life. The book of Psalms is a book of prayer, so find a psalm, read through it, and then pray for those components in their life. So if David is praying that the enemy would that the Lord would crush his enemies, maybe be bold and pray that.
I think the New Testament might discourage that. I don't know if we need to be praying for the destruction of our.
Forgiveness is real, but justice is real too.
I think we do need to prevail over evil, though. Yeah. So I'll give you that caveat.
But the idea is that it's find a passage that models prayer for you, and then pray for that. Yeah. But I just think it's just practice prayer. Just spend time in God's presence and work through the awkwardness and the uncomfortableness of it, and pray for small things, pray for big things. One thing I'd say is just remove yourself from your prayer list, and I think you might find an easier way to learn how to pray is pray for other people instead of yourself.
Yeah, that's a great one. I love that.
Can I add to that too? Please. I'm thinking, like, in my life, reading through the Psalms and praying through the Psalms, it's like learn not to sugarcoat it. And I think for a high schooler and a middle schooler, like, learn not to sugarcoat your prayers. He hears, he listens. Yeah. The dirtiest part.
So there's not a right way that we have to do it, or fancy words we need to use, or anything like that. Okay.
Yeah, and I think even there's words that we put things that we're just very familiar with.
Yeah,
like
some
Christianese. Christianese. It's like even trying to shy away from that and just like saying what it is. Yeah, and I think that's, at least for me, I found very helpful in my prayers.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like that. Daniel, thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the context that a lot of young kids are praying in are usually going to be like with their families, like at the dinner table or in a group setting like church. And one thing I'd encourage like the middle schoolers especially to do is to start to take that into, like how Jesus says in John, like into a room by yourself, and to start making that prayer life your own.
Personal.
And one thing I talk about them with as much as I can is just your relationship with Jesus is a real relationship, like with a person. And so just like you don't only ask somebody for things or, only ask them for help, even though those are definitely parts of every relationship. Yeah. Like, you talk to them about everything that's going on with your life, and like it's a two-way conversation, and so that takes listening. But the first step of that is just taking it away from just a group or corporate setting and making it just personal.
I recently read a book called The Anxious Generation. It talks a lot about youth in digital world and kind of what they're dealing with, and it was targeting and saying that a lot of them deal with loneliness. I'm making a connection to this here. 1 second, but like, and that is a big thing. And we're more connected than ever, people say, but we're more lonely than we've ever been as well, and feel like just abandoned in that way. And so I love that, because as you challenge kids to say, hey, take your prayer life into your own personal time with God and get to know him as your friend, I think that is a powerful thing to encourage them in this time of their life, or the season of our culture where people feel more alone than ever, to identify as Christ as their friend and like build that time together is like so big. And I know even my own life, it's like, Lord, I want to just enjoy your presence. I don't want to just always come to you with my to-do lists or my wish list, but like, I just want to understand this relationship better and just be with you. And so I have a good friend of mine, kind of a coach in my life, that he's always telling me to invite Jesus along in everything I do. So I was like, hey, Jesus, I'm going to work. Can you come with me? Like, talk to me, help me like along this way. Or, hey, I'm going for a run. You want to come, Jesus? Like in this kind of like, it feels like a candid way sometimes for me, but it just, that mentality of being thoughtful in that way. And so maybe for our youth, like invite Jesus along into your life, and spend that time alone and be with him and delight in him and enjoy him like a friend that I think we all have access to, but don't necessarily think about in that way. And if we are really this generation that's battling loneliness more than ever, man, what a better friend to have than Jesus and the living God that wants to build this relationship with us. So that's something I've been gleaning from and watching in the youth in some ways. And I know in my own personal life, like that has to be a challenge, this to continue to say, God, like come along with me, because I just want to spend the day with you. Like, so, and I get times to just do that more than others sometimes, but even those quick, like grocery store runs, like, Jesus, I got to run a grocery store. Will you just come with me and point out something, like remind me of something, help me be thankful of something, or bring someone into my path that I can share your love with, or I don't know, just keeping it in that conversational friend way has been really impactful for me. And it sounds like, just more from my reading, but like that is an epidemic right now for our youth, to just that loneliness.
Yeah, it was 2019, I think the end of the year. Beginning of 2020, there was the Surgeon General release, like, this is the greatest health crisis in America, and it was an epidemic of loneliness. Like
really?
that's how he phrased it, and that was before COVID shut the whole world down. You know,
that only got worse.
it's only gotten worse.
Isolation.
And I think what you're talking about is like, to me, that's the idea of pray without ceasing, is find a way to include Christ and practicing the presence. You know, what is it, Brother Lawrence or whatever that book was. Just powerful. It's like while you're doing the dishes, like to have a thoughtfulness of God's presence with you wherever you are, I think is the end goal of a real relationship with God, where it's personal and it's God is present with us in this moment, right here, right now. And he hears my prayers. And I think one other encouragement is just to look beyond the, I don't know, a radical experience every time you sit down to pray.
Yeah.
I think that
it's not always going to be an emotional high.
No,
religious
it's just like any other relationship. There's
Yeah.
ups and downs, and there's moments where like real friends can sit in silence together and be okay and it not be awkward.
Yeah.
And I think it's beautiful to have a model and understanding of sitting in the presence of God can be not just for looking for something to be obedient in or to repent of or give me or forgive me, but it's something bigger than that, where it's like, I just want to be in God's presence. And I don't think that's a natural thing. I think it has to be grown. And but I know God can give refreshing times in his presence, where it's like, wow, that's the most powerful time. And I would encourage students to think about worship as prayer, you know, but there's lots of stuff.
Oh man, no, I love that. Okay, so that I think we've kind of covered the two main things, at least in my mind, of like, how can we be praying for this youth? And I think that there's a plethora of things to be praying for, and their hearts and how they're being shaped and formed spiritually. I think that's really important. And then, how do you see them praying for their group? If we can kind of insert that a little bit, like, are they reaching their own age group like well? Is there things we can be praying for specifically as far as outreach goes to reach these kids, like, and for the gospel and for the truth, and to be encouraging and coming alongside each other, you know, in that way?
I would say the door is wide open for that. Yeah. And I would say there definitely are students who are doing that incredibly well. Yeah. And I would say there are also other students who are incredibly afraid. Yeah. You know, I think it's just like any other segment within the church family. It's people are crushing it, and people are living in fear. Yeah. And so how they can be praying, again, I would say the very same thing of like encourage somebody, if they don't know middle school or high school student, how to be praying for them,
right.
Get to know one.
Okay.
I would say the same thing for these students is break through that initial sense of awkwardness of like actually being in a relationship, a friendship, getting to know other people disconnected from devices, but in person.
Good. Okay. Any other thoughts?
I think the door's wide open for the gospel to be shared if there's relationships.
I mean, I'm just thinking back to my time in high school, which was, I guess,
3 minutes ago.
It's not too long
3 minutes ago.
Not too long ago. Don't want to date you here.
Yeah. No, I'm just, you have radical believers in the schools, and I think I've just kind of been amazed. I've been hearing stories around the nation of just high schoolers doing saying things for the gospel.
Cool.
And just like, man, like that's incredible. And you have those radical believers, and I think you have radical believers that are just in need of some boldness.
Yeah.
And then you have just the Christians that are just, in high school, like, all right, I'm just gonna go my own way, do my own thing.
Sure.
And I think the prayers for those radical believers, like pray for the Christians in your school to rise up.
Yeah.
I'm like my time in high school, I felt like I was the only Christian in the school.
Yeah.
And it's lonely and it's hard.
Yeah.
But I think that's changed, and I think that's
great.
There's a, whatever you want to call it, revival of something.
I think you're right, man. I this is something I'm sensing at large, not probably just for the youth, but I think it's going to be the youth that ushers it in. So that's not prophetic, but it's just my feeling. But like, I think people are more in tune with things spiritual. I'll just say, 100%. Generally speaking, right now, which is really interesting in our culture right now. People are interested to talk about spiritual things, or just kind of wanting to engage in that a little more, good and bad. And so I feel like there is a more of almost like a distancing between good and evil and in the spirit realm. And I just feel like the youth are going to be the ones that like usher that in, and we're going to see a really interesting battle, but more in a spiritual realm. And like Ephesians talks about, like that's where we wrestle against. And I feel like that the fight is going there more and more. And the nominal Christian, the cultural Christian, that gap is getting bigger and bigger, and it's almost like pick a side is what it feels like in my mind. I don't know if that resonates with you guys in the youth specifically, but I feel like that at large in our culture, where I'm starting to see the gap between good and evil almost a lot more prevalent and so much in your face in the media and all the different ways. It just looks so much more.
You can see a difference too. It's like not even nominal Christian and non-nominal. Yeah. Big difference.
Yeah.
And non-Christians even see that.
Yeah.
And I've had people come up to me and be like, are you a Christian like this type of Christian, or are you this type of Christian? It's like, people notice.
It just seems to be a little more stark.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you guys. This is a gift to get to sit down and talk with you all and hear some of your thoughts and your perspectives from the youth, and the chance you guys get to spend time with them. I know it affects a lot of their lives that sometimes you don't realize, but I just know in my own life, looking back at the people that impacted my life, it was during these youth phase of my life where I was like, wow, that really shaped me in a way I didn't really probably realize. So thank you guys for caring for the middle school and the high school and overseeing all that, Parker. I know that's a lot, but you crush it. So thank you for taking it seriously. And I hope if the youth listen to this, that they've gotten some better ideas and have been encouraged to be people of prayer. And for us that aren't youth anymore, like how we could be praying for and caring for the youth of our church and in our lives. And there's a battle going on, and so I think that it's with them right now. So let's be praying for them. Let's be encouraging them. Thank you guys for tuning in and just being a part of this kind of part of Age to Age as we look at the middle school and high school. We'll see you guys again soon. But thank you, Parker. Thank you, Trace. Thank you, Daniel, for hanging out with us today. Appreciate you. See you later, guys.